Without question, 100%, the absolute worst cruise we've ever been on. Hey everybody, welcome back to Cruise Report. Today I'm going to talk about the absolute worst cruise we've ever been on. Now, I mentioned this in a recent video and said, if any of you want to know about this, put it in the comments. And a couple of you did comment and said, yes, absolutely, we want to hear about the worst cruise. We've been doing this for over 20 years, and we've been now on 153 cruises. And we meet a lot of people that find out we are, travel or cruise journalists. And one of the very first questions everybody asks, what's your favorite cruise line? What's your favorite ship? What's your favorite cruise? What's your favorite type of cruising? We get that all the time. I don't think I've ever had anybody ask the question, what's your least favorite cruise? And, it's interesting because after 22 years, you're bound in 153 cruises, you're bound to get a couple that just are bad. Now, I'm going to tell you about the absolute worst. As I was going back through all of my pictures, I keep everything organized by year. I was going back through all our cruise pictures to try to find the pictures for this cruise. And I came upon another cruise that I would say is a very close second. I think it's important for me to point that one out as well and then lead up to this worst cruise. This second worst cruise was actually a river cruise in the United States. This was the old Delta Queen Steamboat Company. This was back in probably 2013, and it was on the Mississippi Queen, that ship. We were invited by Delta Queen Steamboat as media to come through and do a review for our website. And when we got to our stateroom, first of all, the ship very, very old. When we got to our stateroom, I think we were on the lowest deck. We were on the deck that was, because our room was right across from the theater. They had a little theater on board. We were right next to our bed. Headboard was right next to a crew door that led outside to an outer deck. And all night long, crew members were going in and out to smoke cigarettes. Not only could we smell the cigarette smoke, but every time that door would slam shut, it would shake the headboard and wake us up. So we didn't get any sleep the first night. The second night, we went to the reception desk and we asked if we could be moved to a different stateroom. And they did. They moved us to a more central stateroom on a higher deck, and that stateroom was even smaller than the first stateroom. Now, the first stateroom, as you can see, was very small, very dark. It was a very kind of dark, depressing atmosphere on the whole ship, really, but the staterooms were extremely depressing. It's the only word I can come up with. And we got to the second room, and it was so small that literally to get dressed, one of us would have to go out into the hallway, but there wasn't enough room in that stateroom for two people. I mean, it was tiny. We were so uncomfortable, and it was also it was so noisy we didn't get any sleep. The second night, on the third day, we made a decision. We were pulling into, the ship was docking at Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we came to a decision that we're getting off the ship. We're getting off. It was a 7-night cruise, and we were just going to get off early. It was so uncomfortable. We were there over Thanksgiving. I think the second day was Thanksgiving, because I remember we had Thanksgiving dinner on the ship. And then the following day is the day we got off. And we just rented a car and drove back to Dallas-Fort Worth. That was the end of our Mississippi River cruise. We did not even do a review for the cruise line. We felt like it was unfair we didn't want to disparage them, because I'm sure there were people that had a better experience on board. But now the story can be told of our experience on board the Mississippi Queen. A few years, 2 or 3 years after this, we sailed on American Queen, which was a little bit newer ship. I think it was bigger, also part of Delta Queen Steamboat. And we had a much better experience. We stayed on for the full 7 days. It was a little newer ship. We had better accommodations. Even on that ship, we had an issue where our stateroom flooded. It was full of water the day we got on. They ended up moving us to a different stateroom. But we had an okay time on that. We really enjoy the Mississippi River. We think it's a great destination. That just was not a good experience. But that was not our worst cruise. That was not the worst. Let me tell you about the worst cruise, which we went on in 2014. Now, it started out pretty good with, first of all, we had always wanted to go to Iceland. And we had an opportunity. I had a friend I had met through the cruise industry who was the president of this not new cruise line, but it was actually 2 cruise lines. And we were supposed to go on Swan Hellenic, but Swan Hellenic, there was a problem. I don't remember what the problem was. This is the old Swan Hellenic, not the new Swan Hellenic. But they had a sister company called Voyages of Discovery. And he put us on that ship. He invited us to go for, I'm pretty sure it was a 14 or 15 night cruise. Now, it started out really well. We had flew in business class on a British Airways 747 from Dallas Fort Worth to London, and had nice business class seats. Now, they didn't pay for that. We paid for the business class airfare. We got to London. We spent 2 or 3 extra days in London pre-cruise. We stayed at the Milestone Hotel, a beautiful 5-star. It's an older hotel, but really, really 5-star service, just really incredible. Had a chance to walk around Kensington Gardens. Did, just a lot of touring. Did one of the double-decker bus tours there in London. We just had a great time. And then we went to Portsmouth to board the ship. Now, we took a shuttle bus. The cruise line had a bus going to Portsmouth. And so we took their shuttle to the port. And when we arrived, we checked in at the Voyages of Discovery check-in desk. And then we all proceeded out to board the ship. Now, they had a pretty steep gangway up to where you board the ship. And if you had any personal luggage or personal handbags, they didn't have anybody there to carry them for you. You had to carry your own luggage up that gangway. I do remember that. We walked into the lobby and it really didn't look too bad. It was an old ship even then in 2014. This ship was probably 20 or 25 years old at the time. I'm not sure, but it was pretty old. Got our room key card, and then we get to the stateroom. Small TV, small dresser, there's the hairdryer, a shelf with some fruit. We move over to the 2 beds, 2 twin beds. There's 1 bed table with a drawer. There's 2 portholes. Then over here we have a small desk with a few little drawers. Then we have the closet. What's interesting about the closet is that the hangers kind of face you, and there are, if you can see it, there's actually some shelves on the side where you can put things, and a large shelf on top. There's 2 of these closets here. If you can see that, it's kind of dark. There's also a safe. So as you can see in this picture, we've got 2 twin beds, a tiny little table in between us, 2 small portholes. Somebody might ask, why would the cruise line put you in a stateroom like that if they know you're going to be reviewing the ship? Now, most cruise lines, if we're invited on a cruise, they don't put us in the owner's suite. They don't ever put media in the top level staterooms. They generally, on the newer ships, will put you in like like a basic standard balcony nowadays. But they usually want to put you in a stateroom that represents the ship well, so it looks nice. So you're not getting a high-end mini suite or a suite, but you're getting a nice stateroom. And so somebody might say, well, why would they put media in a tiny little stateroom like this? And it really was not in good condition. And I think the other question is, maybe this was the good stateroom. Maybe, maybe this was as good as it gets. So let's take a look around the stateroom. Again, very small, a tiny little desk. Really couldn't do anything at that desk other than put some papers and things on it. The bathroom, again, very small. Did have a large medicine cabinet to put bottles and lotions and stuff like that in. There, next to the desk, there were a couple of power plugs. Of course, there's no USB at this point. Now, so forget about that. But there were a couple of power ports. I think the ship did have Wi-Fi, but it was pretty expensive and not very good. They did have little audio Vox units that you can wear when you go on a tour. Look at the condition of the sink. The sink had a big couple of chips in it. Just not maintained well. Pretty bad condition, actually. Oh, and the fruit plate. Oh my God. I'm not sure if you can see it in the picture, but there is mold and fuzz growing on the fruit plate. We've never seen that. And that gives you a hint as to the food on board. So that was our VIP treatment. We got the fuzzy, moldy fruit. Now, what's interesting about this ship is this ship had lost an engine or lost power. There was a problem. And what this is a picture of is a generator that they had loaded onto the back of the ship to give the ship electrical power, because apparently one of the engines or something had failed on this ship a week or two prior to our cruise, and they had actually installed this big generator to provide electrical power. This is the main dining room, which was the only dining room. The buffet, the world's worst cafeteria. The food was not good. Every time we would stop in a port, we would immediately begin looking for some place local to go eat. A lot of times we're going to little communities where there may only be a few hundred people that live there, so there weren't a lot of options. This cruise director, I do not remember her name. It's the only time a cruise director, or really anybody at a cruise line, has snapped at me. I asked her a question, and I think it was something to do with the internet. And boy, she really let me know she was upset with my question. She wasn't going to answer it. I have never had that on a cruise line. I've never had somebody really be rude to me on a cruise line. In 153 cruises, everybody has been very pleasant and easy to work with. This lady was kind of mean. The cruise itself and the destination itself was beautiful. Iceland is a beautiful place, and I highly recommend it. Here Ricky is standing out. You can kind of see the water with the ship in the background. We found a restaurant that had some fish and chips. I believe it was part of a museum, and they had a little restaurant. And so we were able to take our laptop in and get some blogging done with their Wi-Fi. They had better Wi-Fi, and the food was pretty good. Now, when we got to Reykjavik, we had a lady from the Convention and Visitors Bureau that picked us up at the ship, took us on a private island tour a private tour of Reykjavik in the area, saw some beautiful waterfalls, got to see a lot of the local area, and she took us to a local tomato farm, like a hydroponic farm, and they had the most amazing lunch. We had this fresh tomato and basil soup, and of course by this time it'd probably been 3 or 4 days been on the ship. We were starving, so we had this I mean, we couldn't get enough of this soup. It was incredible. And the breads, the fresh bread the chef made was just absolutely amazing. We went to Torshavn. We also went to the Highland Park Distillery. So we had some pretty cool little excursions on board the ship it was an interesting destination. It was just the ship itself was really not very good. The pool deck was very basic, very simple. I believe there were a couple of evenings where they might have had some sort of where you could eat out by the pool at night, but it was pretty cold in that part of the world at the time of year we were there. And so I don't think we took much advantage of that. They did have some entertainment on board, and they tried, they had some lectures on board. But honestly, if we had had the ability to get off that ship after a few days and come home, I think we would have. Now, if you contrast that with about a year or so ago when we went back to Iceland with Swan Hellenic. Now, this is the new Swan Hellenic that has been relaunched. Completely different experience. You could really enjoy the destination because we had this beautiful small ship experience on Swan Hellenic. Really great service, good food, just really, really incredible stuff. Got to see Greenland and Iceland. Just had a great time. So anyway, Voyages of Discovery. I think it's the MV Voyager in 2014. That was the worst cruise we've ever been on. So anyway, I want to hear your story down in the comments. What's the worst cruise you've ever been on? If you've been on a cruise that you would consider bad, let me know in the comments down below. If you have any questions or comments, put them down there. And if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, please give it a thumbs up because that really does help my YouTube rankings. Thanks again for joining me, and until I see you on the next Cruise Report, smooth sailing.